This is the Louie T Network. Hey, either you're outside or you're
in the lab room.
Draft zone.
Who else could it be? Me, your man. Louie T, welcome. You are in the lab room. Of course, I'm your host, Luke. Thank you for joining me. This is the 2015 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, where I aim to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2015 NFL Draft by using our baseball grading scale. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series, as we cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so, we tally up all the individual scores for each and every single pick made by said team in the draft, get an aggregate score, apply bonuses when necessary, divide by the number of picks, and voila, it's not geometry, it's the 2015 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series. We get a final grade for that team's draft and then move on to the next team. In the process picked by you, that's right, you, the viewer, are in total control over who is next in the 2015 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series by simply being the first to leave a post in the comment section of this and future videos stating two simple things: the team you'd like to see next and the phrase itself, next. So next and the team you'd like to see next, and then be first, of course, and that team will be next in the series. And because of you, the viewers, the next team in the 2015 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series is none other than the Oakland Raiders. And so, the silver and black attack is back here on the 2015 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series. And so, this is a very intriguing draft, to say the least, for the Oakland Raiders. You feel like the direction that they're going in with their new head coach now in Jack Del Rio, new staff coming in. Derek Carr is in the big critical year number 2 in his maturation. Again, you always hear the phrase in college and in the pros. I think it's applicable in both cases. The biggest leap is from year 1 to year 2. And so he's going into that second year. We've seen guys burst onto the scene in their rookie seasons, have tremendous showings, and then fall off the table in year 2 and moving forward. We've got quarterbacks in the league right now that have fallen prey to that. So let's see if Derek Carr can continue to grow and mature as the Raiders signal caller. And in order for him to take that next step, he needs a big-time playmaker on the outside. Raiders knew that was an issue going into the draft, and they addressed that among other things. But this is Reggie McKenzie's calling card here, the draft. You can say what you want about free agency and what he's done in the last couple of years there and what the Raiders have going on. Are they homeless? Are they going to have a place to call home in the next year or two? All that stuff is irrelevant. If you want to talk about the product on the field and how this team is going to get better, it starts right here in the draft. And this is what the Raiders brought Reggie McKenzie in to do. Draft good football players. He comes from the Green Bay Packers tree. That's what they do in Green Bay. They draft good football players. And if you're going to win in this league, and if you're going to rebuild what was once a model franchise and one of the most consistent outfits in all of the National Football League, if you're going to build that back to a commitment of excellence, then you're going to have to start winning here in the draft. Raiders are going to have to start hitting more big-time players and plucking them from the collegiate ranks and bringing them into the NFL via the draft and molding them into the type of players that are going to put the Oakland Raiders back on the map. And so let's go and delve deep into this 2015 NFL draft and see if the Raiders can piggyback off of the success they had last year in the draft when Reggie McKenzie hit it big on a number of picks, especially some of those later round draft choices. We knew about the guys early in the draft like a Khalil Mack, like a Derek Carr, but you hit some big time steals potentially in the later portion of the draft when Reggie McKenzie repeat what he did a season ago and continue to build this Raiders team through the draft. We shall see. Let's jump into the first round of this draft. 10 players in all. We start in the first round, 4th overall selection, wide receiver out of Alabama. Amari Cooper is the selection. When the ball's in the sky and you need some guy, it's somebody. And so it's Amari Cooper, the Raiders' first round selection out of Alabama, arguably the cleanest player in this entire draft. If you're talking about the safest pick, I don't know if there's a player in this draft that was safer than Amari Cooper. Sure, he's got some things that he's got to clean up, but if you're talking about a guy that you feel like is a can't miss prospect that's going to come in and you pretty much know what you're getting day number 1 all the way to year number 10, I think Amari Cooper is the one guy everyone would have picked out of this draft as the safest pick in the 2015 NFL draft. And it's exactly what this Raiders team needed last year. The wide receiving core was abysmal in Oakland last year. And I sat and I talked to Raiders fans and they tried to sell me on all these different receivers that you had. You had nothing. You had a bunch of number 2s and number 3s and number 4s, but you didn't have a number 1. Really, you had a bunch of 3s and 4s. And no number 2s really on this roster. But now that you got a legit number 1 option, and you start looking around at all the other pieces that you have and you start putting guys in their proper slots, I think this Raiders team can now start to assemble the type of weapons that can allow Derek Carr to flourish. Amari Cooper is going to be at the forefront of that. You see Rod Streeter and some of these other receivers that you have, you want to see them mature. I really like Kimbrell Tompkins, and I think if he can continue to grow as a football player, there will be a home for him in Oakland as well. There are a number of options here in Oakland now, but you needed someone to set the table. That guy that on 3rd and 7, Derek Carr could look to, know he was going to win his one-on-one matchup, shake free, get open, and catch the football. Amari Cooper is that guy. So you know I'm not going to break him down. I've already done that in the Draft Prospects 101 series. So if you're looking for a thorough breakdown of Amari Cooper and many other players that I thought to be big-time prospects coming into the NFL via the draft, check out my Draft Prospects 101 series. But in the first round, 4th overall selection, wide receiver out of Alabama, Amari Cooper. He's hit hard. He's hit deep. Out of hit. It's a home run for the Oakland Raiders in the first round. This was a necessity. There was a lot of talk whether the Raiders would go defense and try to pair up Khalil Mack with another defensive stud, or were they going to go the offensive route? To me, there wasn't a question, because unless you had an idea to come back into the first round and get something elite, I didn't think you wanted to wait until the second round and try to attack this problem. You needed to get something elite, and you needed to get something right away. I think the Raiders fell in love with Amari Cooper throughout the process. And the thing that you got to remember about Reggie McKenzie is that he likes football players that play in major conferences. You'll see in the later portion of the draft, you might see him sniffing around a smaller school prospect then, but for the most part, he's going to be pretty consistent drafting guys. And the same thing can be said for Scott McCloughan, the Redskins GM, both coming from this Green Bay Packers front office tree, is that they like the players that come from big powerhouse conferences, especially the SEC. If I can get a football player that dominated in the conference that we determined to be the best, and I think it's arguably the best, but I think most people would agree the SEC is king of college football. If I can get a player from that conference that dominated in the conference that we believe to be the best, then that guy certainly has passed the eyeball test and is worthy of being a selection early in the draft. And that's why I think Amari Cooper won out over a guy like Kevin White, who had similar production, but in a shorter period of time and in a lesser conference. He takes Amari Cooper, the guy that he feels like can win, not only outside, but you can move this guy around, put him in a slot, and have him still be as effective as if he's outside at the boundary. So big time pickup for the Raiders. Gives Derek Carr the option that he was seeking a season ago as a rookie. And so now you start to put the pieces of a winner together on the offensive side of the football. You go to the second round, 35th overall selection, defensive end out of Florida State, Mario Edwards Jr. is the selection. You start with his pro, 6'3", 279 pounds. This was a guy that played virtually all of 2014 at around 290, 295 pounds at Florida State, maybe even 285. Right around the combine, his weight was listed at 294, so he's down 15 pounds from the combine at 279 right now. And I think the Raiders informed him when they drafted him, hey, we want you around 275, 280 pounds as your playing weight. For what we want you to be in our system, you need to be somewhere in that range. At 279, I think that's a good size for him, and I think that's where he'll stay ultimately in his Raiders career. He stopped the point of attack. That's the next pro at Florida State. The one thing I noticed on tape was this guy was an immovable object. He was a rock along that defensive line, and even when he stood up and played outside linebacker, when he engaged an offensive lineman, he was not going to be moved off the spot in the run game. Stopped the point of attack. Heavy hands is the next pro. You could see an actual jolt. You could see the offensive lineman actually have a little bit of snap on him when he would put his hands on offensive linemen, especially in the run game. You see it also in passing situations where he would actually push the pocket, and that's another pro, and I'll go ahead and lump that in here now while we're talking about it. He pushes the pocket. This isn't a guy that's going to get you a bunch of sacks and going to give you a high volume number of snaps. In terms of getting to the quarterback and having pressure like Khalil Mack did last year, even though the sack numbers don't represent Khalil Mack having an outstanding year. If you watch the Raiders, if you understand what Khalil Mack did, that's the reason why this guy was a top 50 NFL football player as voted on by the players in the NFL Network's series that they do of the top 100 players. He was respected around the league for what he was able to do in his rookie season because Khalil Mack got consistent pressure on the quarterback. Don't necessarily know if Mario Edwards Jr. is going to do that, but he can push the pocket. He does have heavy hands that does allow him to win at the line of scrimmage on a consistent basis. Those are two pros that I think really saw him be drafted by this Raiders football team. I think they became infatuated with what they saw from this guy on tape, and his hands and his ability to push the pocket and be stopped at the point of attack are all big factors in him landing in Oakland in the second round. He's a sneaky athlete, and that's something we don't talk about a lot, and we really don't associate with Mario Edwards Jr. Keep in mind, this guy was the #1 recruit in high school the year that he came out and was in Florida State and chose Florida State as his place to play football. So this guy was the #1 recruit in the nation. So that tells you how talented he was, how big of a stud he was at the high school level, and how sought after he was in the collegiate ranks. So this guy's an athlete. And despite him ballooning to 315 pounds, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, this guy's a sneaky athlete. One of his positional coaches said at Florida State that even at 315 pounds, this guy could still do backflips. So that tells you just what kind of an athlete you're dealing with here with Mario Edwards Jr. And on tape, you see the athleticism. You don't see it enough, and that's one of my gripes with him, is that you don't see this athleticism. You don't see the quickness off the snap as much as you would like to. And maybe that's some of that is a stamina thing where he's on the field, been on the field for a few snaps and kind of low on the stamina gauge. But you don't see the quickness off the snap. You don't see the quickness. When they run the twist and the stunts, you see some quickness. Guard isn't able to slide over and pick him up fast enough. You see sometimes the quickness that makes this guy an elite player, but at the same time, you don't see it enough. But he is a sneaky good athlete, and I think that's something else the Raiders are going to look to tap into with Mario Edwards Jr. at the next level. Versatility. At Florida State, when he was 315 pounds in 2013, this guy played the defensive tackle positions as well as at defensive ends on both sides of the field, so he was all over the place. In 2014, which is what I think Florida State envisioned for him when they brought him on and he signed his letter of intent, was to come in and be a hybrid. Stand-up linebacker on the outside and also double as a guy that can put his hand in the dirt. 2014, that's exactly what he did. In a number of situations, he was standing up at outside linebacker. First and second downs, he was standing up as an outside linebacker and rushing the quarterback that way, setting the edge in the run game. And then in nickel situations and even in first and second down situations, they would move this guy around and he would stick his hand in the dirt. So he was a lot more versatile because the weight was down and he was able to be a lot more active on the field in 2014. And so his versatility is the type that allows him to move all around. But I think the Raiders are going to stick him at defensive end and ask him to play there, and then on nickel situations, and I think this is where you'll get value out of him. You kick him inside and you allow your pass rushers to wreak havoc. C.O. Moore on one side, Khalil Mack on the other. You slide this guy inside and maybe put Justin Tuck next to him in the interior of the defensive line and allow those guys to all rush the quarterback at the same time. And I think that will be your best package when talking about trying to apply pressure on the quarterback. So I think that's what the Raiders envisioned for him when they drafted him. A guy that on first and second down can set the edge in the run game. On third downs, you kick him inside in nickel situations and allow him to rush the quarterback from the defensive tackle position. Bloodlines, his dad played in the league for a number of years. Mario Edwards was a cornerback, played for the Cowboys at one point in his career. So his dad was in the league. He knows what it's going to take to make it in this league. Dad is going to be able to give him advice on what it's going to take to excel and some of the things he needs to look forward to. I don't think that he'll be in a situation where he'll be awe and starstruck because he's in the league. He's already been there, done that. Dad been there, done that. So I think him having NFL bloodlines is also a plus for Mario Edwards Jr. You go to his cons. He can get pressure on the quarterback, but he is limited in that capacity. Only 8 career sacks at Florida State. Some of that you can attribute to the weight, and in other situations, I just think he's just not a natural pass rusher and a guy that you can count on snap in, snap out to get to the quarterback and get him on the ground. I think he will apply pressure. I think he will be a guy that push the pocket, that will get pressure, may not get to the quarterback, but may rush him and maybe force some mistakes. There will be some times where he hits home and gets the quarterback on the ground, or maybe he gets there, doesn't actually get the sack, but allows somebody else to get a sack. But don't count on this guy being a threat to get to the quarterback on 3rd and 8 on a consistent basis if you're leaving him at defensive end. I like his chances more so inside as a defensive tackle if you kick him in certain packages, but as a base 4-3 end, I don't see him generating the type of pressure that you spend on a second round selection here. I would have loved to have seen you take a flyer out on a Odigizua here in the second round versus a Mario Edwards Jr. if you were looking for a guy to get more pressure on the quarterback, if you're looking for a guy to come in, set the edge in the run game. And I think the Raiders are looking to be a little bit more stout at the point of attack in the run game. You go out, you get Danny Williams, you go and you draft this kid in the second round. Right there, you're better at stopping the run automatically because of what you've done in free agency and what you've done here in the second round. But don't look for this kid to generate 6.5, 7 sacks in a season. I don't see him becoming that type of football player. I don't see him being that guy. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I need him to prove that to me. 8 sacks in a 4-year career or 3-year career at Florida State, not convincing enough for me. Weight issues, I talked about this already. This guy ballooned to 315. He came to the Florida State campus at 270. So that tells you all you need to know. He gained 45 pounds in a 2-year stretch. That is a lot of weight for a guy that this team didn't ask to gain weight. They didn't ask him to become a defensive tackle. He did that on his own. He said that he allowed all of the talk and the chatter of how good he was to affect him. He started to rest on his talents and didn't work as hard as he needed to, didn't allow himself to grow as a football player because everyone was telling him how good he was. He started to listen to it, he got the big head syndrome, and he really allowed himself to really get out of shape. He was able to get back into shape in 2014 in time enough to make himself a second round pick for this Raiders football team. So if he can keep the weight down, he's a good football player. I don't know if I would have spent a second round pick on him, especially in a situation like this. I look at him more so as a 3-4-5 technique, more so than a 4-3 base end, but we'll see what the Raiders have in store for him. I like the fact that he's on a roster with Justin Tuck, a guy that's a veteran that can mentor him. Hopefully he'll learn from Justin Tuck because they have similar body types. I want to see if this kid can learn from a veteran that's won in this league, that has a lot to offer. If he can kind of mature as a pass rusher, which is I think his weakness right now, I think this is a guy that could develop into something for you down the road. I'm just not convinced right now. I think he's a hell of a run stuffer. Don't know about him in the pass game, and that's right now my biggest concern with him. In the second round, 35th overall selection, defensive end out of Florida State, Mario Edwards Jr. for me is a double. In the second round, I'm looking for a guy that can get pressure on the quarterback. I don't know if this guy can do that on a consistent basis. He'll collapse the pocket. He'll stop the run. I don't know if this guy's a legitimate threat to get to the quarterback on a snap in, snap out basis. You go to the third round, 68th overall selection, tight end out of the U. Clyde Walford is the selection, 6'4", 263 pounds at the tight end position. Long, rangy, receiving tight end is his first pro. This is a big kid at 6'4", 263, good weight, good size for the position. He's long limbs, long arms especially, gives him a large catch radius. Tight end is the best friend of a quarterback. And so with Derek Carr being in the very critical stages of his career right now, that second year, that all-important second year, it's good to get him a young tight end to pair him up with that can catch the football, be an inviting target. I like Rivera. I really do like what Rivera was able to bring to the table last year, but he's a small, diminutive tight end, okay? Not going to scare anybody with his size. He's not a mismatch nightmare from a size perspective. He can get open and win in one-on-one situations. We saw that last year, but he also took some shots, ended up with a concussion or two last year. So I worry about him and his size. But this kid here comes with a long frame that gives Derek Carr some margin for error with the catch radius. Lot to like here with Clive Walford. Great route runner. In my estimation, he comes in and he's going to win off the line of scrimmage with his ability to run routes. He ran a gorgeous route against Florida State. I believe it was against Florida State. Watched a couple of tapes, Louisville as well, and Virginia Tech. Saw some tapes with this guy, but the tape that stood out the most for me with Clive Walford was the tape against Florida State where he was able to shake free on the double move and make some things happen. That double move was gorgeous. He looked like he was going to the out, went up the field on a seam, and he really lost the linebacker, got free, ball was on the money by Kaya, was able to get away from the defense. 61 yards later, he's in the end zone. So he actually showed a number of things, the ability to run routes, the ability to separate, the ability to show a little bit more speed than we give him credit for to get to the end zone and score from 61 yards out against a very athletic Florida State defense. So this is a guy that can run routes, and I think that's going to help him at the next level. Catch in traffic is the next pro, and this was something I was pleased to see on tape because watching previous years' tape on this guy, 2012, 2013, a lot of bobbles, a lot of double catches, a lot of things that kind of turned me off to him, and I'm like, I don't really know about this kid. Cleaned a lot of those things up in 2014, didn't see a lot of the double catches, didn't see a lot of the bobbles, a lot of him plucking the football out of the air and catching it in traffic, a defender draped all over him, 3rd and 4, catching a 5-yard pass with a linebacker on his back. Wanted to see that because in this league, the windows are a lot tighter and smaller. You're going to have to make tough catches on 3rd downs to move the sticks. Wanted to see him in situations where it wasn't going to be clean, it wasn't going to be wide open, and he caught the football, no problem. I felt good about him catching the football in traffic. Competes in the run game. Is he the best run blocker? No. Can he get better? Absolutely. Will he get better? I look at his frame, I look at his willingness to compete in the run game, and I say absolutely. With the right training, with him being mentally stimulated and him having proper coaching, I think this kid can excel at the next level as a run blocker. I think he can get better, and I think this is something that will make him a complete football player. Is he one right now? No, and that's a problem that I have with him, but I do like his ability to compete and his willingness to get dirty in the run game. Consistent production climb is his final pro. I saw a guy that got better year after year after year. You start with 2012 and modest production, really pedestrian. Really didn't get a lot of snaps and didn't get a lot of opportunities to show what he could do. 2013, more opportunities, more snaps, more production. Still a little iffy with the hands. Wasn't really sure if this guy had it. 2014, it all came together, and I talk about this all the time. The maturation of a collegiate athlete. You want to see that final season culminate in some big numbers, and for him, his last season was his best season by far, and I saw the production that I wanted to see out of him. His numbers spiked in every single statistical category for him. Catches, yards per catch, yards on the season, touchdowns, all of those went up tremendously, and so the production climb shows the maturation of a football player, and that's what you're looking for if you're the Oakland Raiders. You go to his cons. Unspectacular athlete at 4'7", 940. He's not going to burn you with his speed, but I kind of phrase that wrong, because to say he's an unspectacular athlete would mean that he doesn't have all of the movement skills and the functions necessary to be a great athlete. I think he does have those things. I think what I should have said is that he has unspectacular speed. At 4'7", 940, basically a 4'8", 40 guy, he's not going to wow you with his speed, but I told you he was able to shake free against Florida State, get open, catch the football, and rumble, young man, rumble for a 61-yard touchdown. They eventually caught him around the 2-yard line. He was able to still drag him into the end zone. So he has the ability to separate and get free and make some plays. So even though he's a 4'8", 40 guy, he's a long, lanky athlete. I think he eats up a little bit more ground than we give him credit for. And so I think on game days, he may be slightly faster than that time speed. He can become a better blocker, and I already really mentioned that. A lot of times he's too high as a blocker. His hands, somehow they start here and they end up somewhere around the chest, neck level, which is easy for a guy to discard and get to the ball carrier. And a lot of times he looks like he's on the verge of a holding penalty. So that's something he's going to have to clean up. I think him being a longer, taller guy, sometimes it's harder for him to bend and stay down low and keep his hands low and keep it at pad level underneath the pads and drive guys. That's something he struggles with. With the right coaching, I think that's something he can get better at. It's all about technique right now. I think his technique is flawed. If he cleans that up, he'll be a more well-rounded football player. The Raiders need a tight end that can play all 3 downs. They haven't had that since Zach Miller. And even Zach Miller was a little limited in what he could do and provide for you as an athlete. This guy has everything you're looking for. He has the entire toolbox. Just want to see him become a better blocker so that he can play on not only first or third downs, but on second downs as well, and first downs as a blocking tight end. I want to see this guy in as a third down tight end catching the football. Teams see him in the game. They see a tendency. They know they're throwing the football. Want him to be a complete football player, and I think that's what the Raiders could be getting here. In the 3rd round, 68th overall selection, tight end out of Miami, Clive Walford for me is a triple. Very intrigued about this kid and what he brings to the table. Raiders haven't had a legitimate threat at the tight end position in a very long time. You look at the last couple of tight ends they've had great seasons catching the football. If you're talking about Zach Miller and the kid that went off to the Giants a couple of years ago, but neither one of those guys scared you with any type of speed whatsoever. This kid can, I think, run a little bit faster than we give him credit for. He's an athlete. He can be explosive at times, like that Florida State play, and he can catch the football and separate from defenders. I think there's some promise here in the 3rd round with Clive Walford. You go to the 4th round, his teammate at Miami, 128th overall selection, offensive lineman, John Feliciano is the pick, and Reggie McKenzie did something out of the box with this draft. I think a lot of these players came with extra baggage, and generally speaking, in the draft, you don't see teams going out and acquiring more than 1 or 2 players that have a backstory to them via injuries or some kind of freak injury or freak situation that they can't control. And you see a bunch of those in the back end of this draft. But this guy didn't have exactly that going for him, but he has a very touching story that I'll elaborate on a little bit later on. But let's jump into his pro 6'5", 320-pound offensive lineman. Long, strong O-lineman is the next pro. This is a big, long guy. He's physical, and he generates a lot of power through his legs and into his arms. You see this guy on tape, and he's running, and he shoves the guy, and the guy goes flying, and I'm like, wow, you know, that was impressive. Which takes me to my next pro, nasty disposition. You know how I am about offensive linemen having a nasty disposition, and I think this is something that Reggie McKenzie can appreciate because he played the game with a nasty disposition himself as a Hog with the Washington Redskins. And so there's something to be said about a guy that you put on the tape and you see him doing the little things and then going above and beyond the call of duty to be a hell of a teammate. The pile is there, guys being pushed forward. He comes in, pushes the pile, and then he sees a late defender come in and he picks that guy off the pile, pushes him away. The play is being run. He's 3 yards away from the actual action, yet he's still blocking the guy. They blow the whistle and he gives the guy an extra shove. That's John Feliciano in a nutshell. The guy is a glue football player, the type of player you want to go to battle with. He's going to have your back. You know one thing's for sure. You look over your shoulder and John Feliciano's going to be right there. The scrum breaks out. If you're looking for a guy to be physical that you know is going to have your back when it goes down, John Feliciano is your man. Athletic enough to get to the 2nd level. Very impressed with his ability to get up the field, get to that 2nd level, get to that linebacker, get to that safety, get to that cornerback, and dispose of them when he does get there. And again, he's a longer guy. Very impressed with his movement skills. I thought he was going to be a lot slower. When just looking at him on tape, I said he's probably going to be a plotter, not going to be that good of an athlete. Surprise, surprise, this guy was getting to the second level and making some things happen. Generates movement in the run game. That's another thing that I was very pleased with him on tape, was his ability to create a new line of scrimmage. And Duke Johnson was one of the most decorated running backs in Miami University history, or University of Miami history, excuse me. The reason why is because of guys like John Feliciano creating movement in the run game, giving him space to operate. This guy takes defenders and deposits them 2, 3, 4 yards even at times out of the play, and gives the running back an opportunity to make some moves and get up the field and get positive yardage. Let's talk about this guy's backstory, because it's amazing, and you root for guys like this in the draft. So I think one of the things that drew him to this Raiders organization and made him a draftable football player was his perseverance and ability to overcome adversity. And that's his final pro. And I think that's something that you can't measure. You can't measure a guy's heart. You can't measure a guy's will to succeed. And his perseverance and his mental toughness was challenged on numerous occasions, and this kid could have quit, could have gave up. He could have not found himself in a position to be in the NFL where he is now, but he didn't give up. He never quit on his dream, and that's why he's here. You start at birth. He was born with a leg condition that saw him need braces for his early years. His mom massaged his legs and pulled them out every single day until he could actually walk. So big tribute to his mom, really putting in the work and allowing her son to have a chance to not make it in the National Football League, but just to walk, okay, was something that doctors told him might be a long shot. They told her that her son would never be able to play sports because of his leg situation. Not to be the case. He overcame that. So it started at birth for John Feliciano. Then his mom, who separated from his dad. They were in New York. He was born in New York. They moved to Florida. She tried to get away from his dad. Not that he was abusive or anything like that, but she just wanted a fresh start for her and her kids. So they relocate to Florida. And while there, she's working, trying to provide for her 2 kids, one of which has a situation where he was born deaf and it needs to be fed through a feeding tube and all of those things. So it was just a really tough situation on his mom, but she persevered herself. She ends up getting breast cancer, hides it from John, who doesn't know, would hear his mom screaming at night. She would say she was watching scary movies. She had to cut her hair, would wear wigs. He would ask his mom what's going on. She would tell him, oh, the hairdresser messed my hair up, that's why. And so she kept it from him until she could no longer keep it from him. She finally told him, and so she wasn't able to work and provide the income that she once was to the household, and because of that, now the house ended up being condemned. Couldn't pay the bills, no lights, no water, none of that stuff. And so Mom's and his brother end up moving back to New York. They want John to come with them. He says, no, I have a dream to play for the University of Miami, and I want to see that fulfilled. The only way that's going to happen is if I stay local in Florida. So this guy's practically living in his car from house to house with relatives and girlfriends and things of that nature, and sometimes even living in the condemned house with no running water and no lights, none of that stuff. So it's a compelling story. He actually takes his tape, his actual high school highlight tape, to the University of Miami, and that's how he was able to get them to see him play and give him an opportunity to become a scholarship athlete at the University of Miami. So nothing came easy for this kid. A lot of perseverance, a lot of adversity in his life. He was able to overcome it. And so this is a type of guy you root for if you are just not just an Oakland Raiders fan, but just a football fan in general, or just a person in general. You root for guys like this. His cons: he's not quick enough to play tackle at the next level. I don't think he's got the lateral quickness necessary, which is why I think it's a foregone conclusion that this guy will be kicked inside the guard. Now, is he going to be the guard you drafted last year? Absolutely not. He's not Gabe Jackson. Gabe Jackson was ready-made. You take Gabe Jackson out of the package that he came pre-assembled in, and the guy was ready to rock and roll. I think Gabe Jackson's going to be a rock for you along that offensive line for the next 10 years. I don't know if John Feliciano is going to be that smooth and clean and efficient of a football player, but what you will get out of him is toughness, the ability to overcome adversity, which we've seen throughout his life. And him making this position switch isn't going to be easy, but he is going to work tirelessly at it until he gets good enough to be the type of player that you select in the 4th round. And finally, his hands are very high often as a blocker, which I think leads to him whipping on some blocks sometimes and missing and ending up on the ground. He's got to have a lower center of gravity and a lower base when blocking, guys. I need the hand placement to be a lot lower. It's up here. It's around guys' necks and face masks. I saw a couple of times where he could have been called for hands to the face. I saw a couple of times where he just flat out missed. You show a guy your hands and you're all the way up here in his line of sight, he's gonna smack those things out of there, get him out of the way, rip or swim, and get out of that way and get to the quarterback or get to the ball carrier. So he's got to have better hand placement. They'll work with him on those things. But I like John Feliciano. I love his story, and I love the fact that he was able to purchase a home for his mom and move them back to Florida. Very touching situation. And so in the 4th round, 128th overall selection, offensive lineman out of Miami, John Feliciano is a double. You root for this guy. Hope he turns out to be a stellar player for the Raiders. And we'll see what he's able to bring to their offensive line, as now there is a lot of competition along that Raiders offensive front. You go to the 5th round, 140th overall selection, inside linebacker out of Kansas, Ben Heaney is the selection. 6 foot, 230 pound linebacker. Lit it up at the combine. So he's an athlete. That's the next pro. His athletic display at the combine, where he ran a 4.59 40 and jumped a 10-foot broad jump, was tremendous. And that was one of the catalysts for him getting drafted in the 5th round. He showed the ability to run. You see it on tape. This guy's a sideline to sideline linebacker. And he was able to show that at the combine, opened up a lot of eyes of coaches, GMs, and scouts across the league. He's a physical linebacker, and I talk about this all the time. The league is moving to an influx of smaller linebackers. 6 foot, 230 pounds is not very big to be playing inside linebacker, but that's where the league is going now. You see it with a lot of these smaller linebackers that have been selected. Paul Dawson comes to mind from TCU. Jordan Hicks out of Texas, now a Philadelphia Eagle, also comes to mind. A lot of smaller inside linebackers coming into the league. And another guy that comes to mind is Denzel Perryman out of San Diego, coming from the University of Miami, that you'll be seeing a lot in your division. 5'11", 235 pound linebacker. So, I mean, these influx of smaller linebackers is what the league is moving to. Smaller, quicker athletes that can get to the football. But just because they're smaller doesn't mean they're lacking physicality. And that's something that I've come to learn over the last couple of years, seeing some of these smaller linebackers come into the league. They still pack one hell of a punch, and this is one of those guys that does that. And because he's a physical linebacker, it leads to our next pro. He stacks and sheds well. And you saw that even though they were dominated against Oklahoma, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, he stacked and shed his ass off in that game. I mean, he wasn't the reason why they were trounced in that game. He did his job. He did what he could do. He was around the football. I mean, just watch the first play of the game. He knifes into the backfield, 3-yard tackle for loss. I mean, this guy is a football player. He'll meet a 315 pound lineman in the hole and stand him up. I mean, this guy is physical. He'll get blown off the ball at times, but he'll also go in there and he'll fight tooth and nail, and this is the type of guy you want. And he'll also help you on special teams, which is another pro. Special teams value. If he's going to make this roster, if he's going to be on this Raiders team, and I assume he's going to make this Raiders team, it's going to be because he's going to help you right away on special teams. Don't know if there's a spot for him in the starting lineup right away. I can almost assure you, barring any injuries, there's not a starting lineup spot for him. But what he can do is make an impact on his team on special teams, which will buy him time to be able to get into the Raiders lineup and perform that way. He's a tackling machine. Tackling machine. This is the type of guy that you not only want on your special teams unit, but you want on the football field, because he finds his way to the football and gets players on the field. 2 seasons out of his 3 at Kansas, or I think 4 I should say, but 3 of them were where he actually got legitimate playing time. 3 of the seasons where he was on the field, 2 of them were 100 tackle seasons. And of those 3 seasons that I just mentioned, 3 of them had tackle for loss. So when he actually got legitimate snaps on the field, he was able to produce plus 10 tackles for losses. And in 2 of those 3 seasons, he was able to eclipse over 100 tackles, including 128 or so last year at Kansas. So this guy is always around the football, making plays. At one point, he was averaging 11 tackles per game. Double figures in tackles, staggering numbers for Ben Heaney at Kansas. He's relentless as a football player. That's his final pro. This guy does not give up on any snap. You might be able to push it. It was one snap. I was watching him against West Virginia, and he gets into the backfield, and the offensive lineman shoves him, and he falls down on the ground. And without even breaking stride, he hits the ground, pops back up, and tries to get back into play. Offensive lineman pushes him on the ground again. Without hesitation, he gets back up and tries to get back into play. Offensive lineman pushes him on the ground again. He gets back up again, finds his way to the football, and helps push the guy out of bounds. That's the kind of relentlessness I'm talking about with Ben Heaney. He does not give up, and he's the type of guy that will give you every single ounce of gas he's got in the tank while he is on the field. You go to his cons. He gets gobbled up in the run game when moving laterally. When he attacks the line of scrimmage, that's when he can stack his shit. That's when he meets a guy in the hole, stands him up, and discards and gets to the football. But in that Oklahoma game, for as good as he was early, a lot of times he ended up getting sealed on plays because he was moving laterally. Guys were able to stop him right in his tracks, and he wasn't able to get off of blocks. When he's moving laterally, he's not the same type of football player in terms of physicality. He's got the sideline speed, as I referenced earlier with the 4.59 40, but he doesn't carry the same physicality when he's not going towards the line of scrimmage. And so you see that in the run game, he gets gobbled up, gets sealed off a lot of times, and big runs happen because he can't get off of those blocks. He's a step slow in coverage, and to me that's natural with linebackers, especially guys out in space. With these athletes that are running around, you can be a step slow. You saw that a number of times. Turn on the West Virginia tape and you'll see guys running by him, and he's just a step slow in coverage. And that's something that, you know, a little bit of tape study, a little bit of time in the league to adjust to the speed of the game might be able to help him. It'll be in his best interest to be on special teams early on in his career and kind of get the speed of the game and get some film down and kind of learn the movements, how guys are going to sit down in zone coverage, and how he can disrupt some routes and be a little bit more proficient as a defender dropping into coverage. Part of the Kansas D that surrendered 427 yards to Samaje Perine, an NCAA single rushing game record, a week after it had just been set by Melvin Gordon III and that Wisconsin Badgers football team and running game against Nebraska. Samaje Perine and his cohorts came out and smashed Kansas on a wet, nasty day in Norman, Oklahoma, as they ran to the tune of 427 yards with just Samaje Perine. The other backs got off in that game as well. So he was a part of the team that got gashed for over 500 yards rushing in a single football game. Can't happen. It did happen, and he was part of the reason that it did happen. Even though I thought he had the best game of any other player on that Kansas football team, he still was part of a team that gave up over 500 yards rushing in a game. But at the end of the day, this guy is much better than Miles Burris. He's your Miles Burris replacement and an upgrade even. In the 5th round, 140th overall selection, inside linebacker out of Kansas, Ben Heaney is a double. Like this kid, like his intangibles, like what he brings to the table. Just want to see him, first of all, land on this roster and then give himself a chance to crack this lineup in a year or 2 down the road. You go to the next 5th round selection, 161st overall selection, outside linebacker out of Florida. Nyron Ball is the selection, and I look at Nyron Ball as a guy that he persevered through some hardships and some adversity. And I talked about Reggie McKenzie doing that in this draft. Here's another example of him taking a guy that I don't know if other teams were willing to take because of the physical situation that he had, you know, and not really knowing if you want to deal with the guy that comes with the kind of baggage that this kid brings to the table. But let's jump into his pros quickly. Long, 6'2", 236-pound linebacker, twitchy movement skills, and he's an athlete. Is next pro. You see him on the field, and he's just a quick twitch athlete. He's moving, and he's getting from point A to point B like that. I mean, his movement skills right off the bat caught my attention. I'm like, man, this kid is explosive. There's a lot of twitchiness in Nyron Ball. And then to add to that, he's a 4'6", guy, so he's not just quicker than fast, he's actually fast, okay? He can run sideline to sideline, but he can get from point A to point B in a matter of moments. It's like 3-4 steps and he's there, and it's just like amazing to me to see how fast he moves in such a short space, which takes me to my next pro. Tremendous in space. This kid, I talk about the twitchiness, and it allows him to drop into coverage, which they did with him a lot at Florida. And this is a guy that I think is going to be comfortable out in space, you know, dropping into space, running with some tight ends and running with some running backs out of the backfield. I feel comfortable with this kid out in space. I really like his ability to be fluid as an athlete and kind of keep his eyes on the quarterback all the while, you know, dropping into space and not having to turn his back to the quarterback and drop into zone. And there's a number of things I think he does well. His closing speed is also something that I think allows him to be tremendous in space. There was one play I'm watching, forget the team they're playing against, and he darts through a gap on a blitz. And I want to say it was Alabama. I really want to say it was Alabama. And we know how Blake Sims has a little bit of speed to burn. And he was able to shoot the gap, get to Blake Sims, get him on the ground. And it was like, wow, he just got from literally the line of scrimmage to about 7 yards of depth in a matter of, 0.5 seconds. It seemed like this guy was there in a blink of an eye. And so his closing speed is tremendous as well. He rallies to the football. He's a guy that hustles, makes plays. If you turn on the Alabama game, he runs to the football after a pass is completed, and he's the one that rips the football out. It's picked up by one of his Florida teammates and ran all the way down to about the 2-yard line. Then later on in the game, he's able to chase Blake Sims down, put his hands up. He knows he's not getting to the quarterback, deflects the football, picked off by a Florida defender, and taken down the field and sets Florida up for another touchdown as they were able to hang around in that game because of 2 big defensive plays by Nyron Ball. So he can impact the game. He's a long, wiry, twitchy athlete that I really think, if he stays healthy, could be a factor for this Raiders team down the line. Cons. Man, where do I start? This guy has had a number of things that he's had to overcome just to find himself in this position to be an NFL football player. And let's just run down the list of things that he's had to endure and overcome to find himself in a position to call himself an NFL football player. He had AVM. It's called arteriovenous malformation, okay? And what that is it's a malfunction with your blood vessels in your neck, and it goes around your system and it doesn't go through the proper channels, and next thing you know, it's in your brain. He complained of a headache, a throbbing headache that felt like the worst pain he's ever felt in his head in his life. They take him to the hospital, and luckily enough, he did go because they ended up having to do emergency surgery on his brain in order to save not only his football career, damn his football career, we're talking about life and death here. They had to save his life with that emergency brain surgery. They were able to rectify that situation, stabilize him, and he was able to return to the football field. So that's something that you're normally born with. So I think he had been dealing with some issues, really didn't know the severity of it until then, one day after practice. So that's a scary situation. So because of that, he had to sit out the entire 2012 season at Florida. Then his mom dies at the age of 6. His dad passes away at the age of 9. So this guy was raised by his grandmother. So more adversity for this young man growing up at a tender age of 6, losing his mom, and then following that up by losing his father at age 9. So this is a guy that dealt with a number of things. Then he gets to a point where he's starting to play good football. He's finally showing why he was a big-time recruit for the Florida Gators in 2014. And he injures himself and has to have microfracture surgery in 2014 after 9 games of play. So he misses the entire, the rest of the season. And then he also misses all of the off-season activities. And so we don't really know about microfracture surgery in the National Football League. It's not as detrimental as it is in basketball, but nonetheless, still an injury that can, limit a guy in his athleticism. So I'm curious to see, because the thing that draws me to this guy, and I think the reason why Reggie McKenzie feels so good about him, is the athleticism. If you tell me that you're going to lose a step and not be as twitchy after that microfracture surgery, then I have an issue. But I can't say that. I cannot confirm nor deny that he won't be the same guy after this surgery. I just have questions, and right now we don't have the answers. He can be more aggressive in coverage. That's his final con. You look at this guy, and there are times where I feel like he needs to put his hands on the receiver in front of him. And Amari Cooper is in the slot, and he's lined up in front of Amari Cooper, and they're in a stack formation. I wanted him to put his hands on Amari Cooper. He was the one right in front on the line of scrimmage. He had a golden opportunity to lay hands on Amari Cooper. Instead, he gives him a free run. Amari Cooper runs wide open over the middle of the field, catches it, and accelerates up the field for about 22 yards. Had he laid hands on Amari Cooper, I guarantee he does not receive the football in that same spot where he's able to catch and get yards after the catch on that play. I want to see Nyron Ball be more aggressive in coverage. But at the end of the day, Nyron Ball has had a journey to get to this point. I want to see this guy succeed. Have questions about that microfracture surgery. We'll see if he has the answers. Also, that AVM, will that reappear again? He hasn't had any issues with it since, but we don't know if that's going to be something that reoccurs down the road. It's a big time risk, but this guy has a lot of rewards in store for the Raiders if he can come back healthy from this injury. In the 5th round, 161st overall selection, outside linebacker out of Florida, Nyron Bell for me is a double. A lot of athleticism, a lot of questions. We'll see if he can answer them after the injury. Go to the 6th round, 179th overall selection, outside linebacker out of Virginia, Max Vallis is the selection. By far for me, my favorite pick of this Raiders draft, outside of Amari Cooper, of course, because of what he brings to the table and what he means for this Raiders offense. But this is a young man here that I think a lot of people slept on because of him coming out of school too soon. And that's why he's here in the 6th round. He's not a 6th round talent. This is a 2nd round talent here that you got in the 6th round because people weren't fond of him coming out of school as early as he did. 6'5", 251-pound linebacker. Next pro, extremely long and active. This guy gets around the field. He's a long, there's a play, I don't remember the team, watched a few tapes, they all run together at this point, but he literally chases a play 40, 50 yards down the field and helps run a guy out of bounds. I mean, he's that type of football player. He's very long, he's very active. Next pro, batted balls. I talk about his length, 6'5". This guy is incredibly long. You look at him and he's just oozing with athleticism and length. And you turn on the Louisville game and you see just how big of an impact he can have by not even getting to the quarterback, even though he had a sack and a half in that game. You can see just how big of an impact he can have without even getting to the quarterback by just putting his arms up. The guy is incredibly long. 3 batted balls in that game really impacted the outcome of that game as they were able to get the victory versus Louisville at home early in the season. And so him batting balls down the line of scrimmage, can't get to the quarterback, let me put my hands up, he does it well, times it up. He is extraordinary at batting balls down. He's relentless, has a high motor. I already talked about him chasing the play down 45 yards down the field, 50 yards down the field. This guy has a relentless motor. On at least 3 different occasions, I saw him run up the field, run himself out of the play, offensive lineman escorts him out of the play because he wanted to be aggressive, go up the field, and it's a running play. And he dips back into the play and makes the tackle from behind. Quarterback, he goes up the field, tackle pushes him around the pocket, quarterback steps up, comes to the outside, Max Vallis peels back around, gets to the quarterback, sacks him behind the line of scrimmage. That's the kind of relentless, high motor energy you're getting from Max Vallis. Snap in, snap out. He's a playmaker. Let's run through some of the things he was able to do in his short UVA abbreviated career. 9 sacks in 2014, 13 for his career, so he's getting better. 4 sacks in his freshman year, followed that up with 9 sacks last year, so he's getting better at getting to the quarterback. 12.5 tackles for loss last season. He's getting in the backfield, getting ball carriers on the ground. 1 interception, that 1 interception happened to be versus Pittsburgh, where he took it the distance for a touchdown. They tried to run a screen, Max Vallis lurking in the shadows, quarterback doesn't see him, throws it out in the flats. Mind you, he does this with a broken hand, okay? Picks the football off, takes it the distance, about 30 yards to the end zone, touchdown. This guy's a playmaker. 8 pass deflections, 12 in 2 years. I just talked about him batting down footballs, so you know the pass deflections are going to be ever present. 3 forced fumbles, 4 in 2 years. He had 3 of them last season in 2014. So he is growing as a football player. This kid's only going to get better. And he was one of those guys when you turn on the tape of one player, you're not even there to watch him. I wasn't there to watch Max Vallis early on in this process. I was looking at Eli Harold, but number 88 just kept jumping off the goddamn screen at me. And I kept saying, who the hell is this 88 and who invited him to the goddamn party? This kid's drunk, get him out of here. He's all over the place, he's making plays. It was Max Vallis. I said, God damn it, son, you're gonna make a hell of an NFL player. A lot of people urged him to come back to school, including his coach. He said, you know what, I think I'm ready. You can never tell what situation is going on at home. You don't know a guy's financials back at the crib, so I can't judge him for not going back to school. All I know is there's a lot of talent here to tap into if you are the Oakland Raiders. You go to his cons. He needs to refine his pass rushing ability. There's not enough moves. Right now, he's a straight up the field type of guy. I'm just going straight up the field trying to win with length and athleticism, see if I can't get to the quarterback that way. He needs to come up with some moves. I think coaching is going to be key with this kid because he's so young, he's so raw, there's so much that he doesn't know. He's so wet behind the ears, breath smelling like Similac. This kid's a baby, okay? It's the Raiders' job, the coaching staff's job, more importantly, to mold this kid into the type of player that I think he can become because I am infatuated with Max Vallis as a football player. More seasoning, inexperience is his last con. This is a kid that only had 2 years. You rarely hear this about football players. Only 2 years of football experience at the University of Virginia. He only stayed at school for 2 years. So you're talking about a sophomore essentially coming out before his junior year, had 2 years of eligibility left. You rarely hear us talk about players with 2 years of eligibility left, which is what was the case with Jameis Winston coming out. You rarely hear us talk about sophomores, but this kid had legitimately 2 years of football left, and he bypassed it to come to the NFL, and I think that's why he's here in the 6th round, because a lot of teams thought he needs more seasoning. He's not ready for the NFL game, and so they bypassed him, but I think a lot of teams made mistakes by sleeping on Max Vallis. In the 6th round, 179th overall selection, outside linebacker out of Virginia, Max Vallis for me is a triple. I am totally on board with this selection. I love this pick. This is the type of value you get from Reggie McKenzie late in the draft, just like you did out of TJ Carey last year out of Ohio. I think that was in the 6th round, if I'm not mistaken, it might have been in the 7th. This is the kind of value you get in a Reggie McKenzie draft late in the later stages of the draft. Max Vallis, I think, is going to turn out to be one hell of a pro for this Oakland Raiders football team. You go to the 7th round. 3 7th round selections for the Raiders. We start with the first of those 3. 218th overall selection. Offensive lineman out of Tennessee State. Anthony Morris is the selection. 6'6", 290-pound offensive lineman. Long vine for arms. Long limbs. Allows him to dominate and he dominates. And you know what my one prerequisite is for small school players. I don't ask much, man. I just ask for one thing. Dominate the competition. That's what this kid did. So you're not gonna hear me talk about technique flaws. There weren't any. Not on tape, you couldn't see any because he dominated the competition. This guy was pancaking so many defensive players that I thought I was at IHOP eating all-you-could-eat flapjacks. I mean, there was so many pancakes in front of me. I didn't know what to do. I was like, God damn, do I put a napkin in my shirt? Do I get my fork and my knife and do I start eating, or what do I do? Do I start pouring syrup on top? This guy was pouring syrup on top of all of these pancakes. Let's talk about his next. Pro, extremely aggressive with a nasty disposition. This was a guy that, it wasn't good enough to just pancake a guy, get him on the ground. He was being extra. One time I even saw him rub his musty, nasty, funky balls on the helmet of a guy. Just dragging it. I said, oh, I love it. I want more of it. He was just being, I mean, guy was trying to get up and Anthony Morris was having none of it. He was, get your ass back on the ground. Matter of fact, take a little bit of this, man. A little bit of this ball juice. I mean, it was crazy how dominant he was. Play after play, snap after snap. How many pancakes I was seeing. It was just ridiculous. Guy's amazing. Generates movement in the run game. All right. It was nothing for him. It was one play where I literally seen him rock bottom. Like I literally pick him up, slam him on the ground about 3 yards up the field on a run play. I'm like, this is ridiculous, man. I mean, he would pick guys up and slam them on the ground, and he would land in some of the most awkward positions because he's picking guys up and just throwing them on the ground. It was amazing to watch. Again, I get excited when I see offensive linemen dominating. It's not hard to dominate the competition when you're at Tennessee State, but I don't care. Dominate. I don't give a damn where you are. Okay? Dominate the competition. And that's what he did. Good feet movement for his size. I didn't expect that. Good feet and movement for his size. When you see a guy this big and moving the way that he did, they were pulling him at Tennessee State. He was at left tackle. He was at right tackle. He was 5 yards up the field. He was 10 yards up the field. There were a couple of plays where he would take his guy and start at the line of scrimmage, and the play would only get 3 yards. Anthony Morris is blocking his guy 8 yards down the field that way, okay? And the official blows the whistle, and he would push the guy and push him another 5 yards down the field. Amazing, amazing. He generates movement in the run game and also has great feet and movement for his size, just able to get to the second level, makes it look effortless for a guy his size. You know, one of the biggest questions I'm going to have, of course, is level of competition, and we'll get there in a second, but he really looked like a man amongst boys on tape, and his movement was something that also allowed him to get to the second level and pick on a poor defenseless safety or cornerback or that linebacker that wanted none of Anthony Morris. He was able to get to him, and I thought he was able to do some big things in the run game. Versatility, I talked about this briefly. Quickly, left tackle, right tackle at Tennessee State. I think this guy has the size you're looking for. At the next level, we'll see if he's able to continue to be as athletic after putting on more weight. You can't survive in this league at 290 pounds, which I've already seen. He's already gained 13 pounds. He's at 303 right now, so he's already put on 13 pounds, which takes us to our cons. And you played at 290 in your collegiate career, 6'6", 290. You look damn good at 290. But you can't play at 290 at this level. You got to get over the 300-pound threshold. Now you're 303 pounds. How do you function at 303? Okay, what if you get to 305? What if you get to 310? How do you function at that size? Are you able to continue to get up the field to the second level and continue to be dominant in run game at 303, at 305, at 310? Are you able to move the same way? Are you able to carry that weight like you did 290? I don't have the answers to that. We shall see if Anthony Morris is as good at over 300 pounds as he was at 290 at Tennessee State. And finally, level of competition. I don't have to explain that to you. You understand why that is an issue. You've got to be able to play at the level of competition, at the next level, like you did at Tennessee State. You were playing like a man amongst boys. You're playing with other grown men now at the NFL level. Can he make the adjustment and make the switch from a small school prospect to a big time NFL football player? Stay tuned. That story is to be continued. But in the 7th round, 218th overall selection, offensive lineman out of Tennessee State, Anthony Morris for me is a double. I'm intrigued by this kid, his size, his length, his ability to get to the second level. The question is, how do you carry the weight and how do you make the adjustment to a big step up in the level of competition you'll be facing on a game in, game out basis if you eventually start in this league, if you eventually hit this Raiders lineup somehow, some way as a 7th round pick, you'll be blocking guys like Justin Houston, who just got a $1 million contract. Good luck with that. So that's the kind of difference he'll be seeing in the level of competition. How will he handle that is the question. You go to the next 7th round selection, 221st selection overall, wide receiver out of Florida. Andre DeBose is the selection. I'm gonna do something a little different with Andre DeBose because this is a different situation. 5'11", 189-pound punt returner slash kick returner for the Oakland Raiders, drafted in the 7th round out of Florida. He was dubbed as the next Percival Harvin at Florida. Came in with a lot of hoopla, a lot of hype to the University of Florida campus, and actually started out tremendously in his collegiate career early on. In 2012, he came onto the scene and was able to catch a 78-yard touchdown on the first play of the game versus Alabama. He was able to follow that up the next game with a big, like 58-yard touchdown versus LSU. You saw the ability in the return game to be special. He actually, despite his less than stellar career at Florida as a playmaker, because again, remember, Percival Harvin at Florida wasn't just a receiver, he wasn't just a running back, he was a playmaker. He's a guy that every time he touched the football, everybody held their collective breath because he could make something happen on any given play, and they were expecting much of the same for Andre DeBose. It never really materialized that way, but he did, in his time at Florida, set the SEC record, tie it, and set a Florida Gators record for the most kickoff returns for touchdowns in school history with 4. So he did leave an indelible mark there, but make no mistake about it, he wasn't the player that they thought they were getting when they signed him on at Florida. Now, I will say this, he had a number of different reasons why he wasn't able to be the guy that they wanted him to be, and let's jump into that. He has an extensive injury history. Remember, I spoke about Reggie McKenzie going out on a limb in this draft and getting guys with some sketchy medicals in this draft. We talked about Nyron Ball and his situation. You could talk about Andre DeBose and his situation. Just a number of guys with different issues coming into this draft. You generally don't see teams go after guys like that. I think Reggie McKenzie went out of his way to get some of these guys that he felt like, hey, this could be a steal for us. Teams are overlooking him because of the medical. I'm going to take him because I feel like I can get some great value because of that same medical that everybody else is running away from. Here's a situation where it may have come back to bite Reggie McKenzie in the tuchus. He had a 09 knee biceps femoris graft. So they took a piece of, and I didn't even know your knee had a bicep. So I'm learning new things every day. They took a graft and had to do some surgery to attach it somewhere. This came from a track injury from high school. So he came to Florida with an injury, had to sit out all of 2010 because of this surgery that he had. So he comes in 2011, hits the ground running, and then he tears his ACL in 2013, misses all of that season. And then in 2014, he comes, he plays some football for Florida, ends up stopping his season short right around the bowl game with the injury that I know left a sour taste in some players, maybe even some coaches' mouth, because of, he could have played. A lot of people believed he could have played. He decided not to. He wanted to go ahead and prepare himself for the NFL, and as fate would have it, he ruptures his Achilles. And look, Raiders never actually said he ruptured his Achilles tendon. They actually said he had an Achilles injury. He ruptured his Achilles tendon. Okay, let me be the one to tell you. I'm letting the cat out of the bag. You don't release a guy for a sore Achilles tendon. You release a guy for a ruptured Achilles tendon. So he ruptured his Achilles tendon. Raiders released him. He cleared waivers. Raiders re-signed him onto their roster. He's going to be on their injured reserve list, unable to perform, and he'll be a Raider. But his Raider career has already gotten off to a very ominous start. I don't like where this is going. This is a guy with a very extensive injury history already, and he's getting off to a bad start, having already been released once. He was supposed to be the answer to your return woes in Oakland. At one point, you had Marcel Reese returning kickoffs for you. Does that not send off bells and whistles and all kinds of danger signs? I mean, does that not bother you? That he was back there returning kickoffs for you at one point? Remember Carlos Francis? Remember him? Denarius Moore? These are all guys who were supposed to solve this problem for you and have it. Add him to the list of guys who haven't been able to solve that problem for you. At least he won't have a chance to do it in 2015. In the 7th round, 211th overall selection, Andre DeBose out of Florida for me is a single. You can't get injured, get released, and then re-sign and expect anything other than a single in the 7th round. It's going to be a tough road ahead for this kid, but he's going to get an opportunity. I'm not an Achilles injury guy. I'd much rather have a torn ACL in front of me than a ruptured Achilles. I'm just not a big fan of guys coming back from ruptured Achilles. You may never be the same after that injury. And you go to the final pick in this Raiders draft in the 7th round, 242nd overall, defensive back out of Kansas, Dexter McDonald is the selection. 6'1", 200-pound cornerback. I call this one an Al Davis special. Uncle Al over there sending down picks from the heavens above. May he rest in peace. This is a height, weight, speed Al Davis special if I've ever seen one. He had a tremendous pro day, did Dexter McDonald, 4'4", 40, and a 40.5-inch vertical to go along with 11.2 broad jump. So the guy showed off tremendous athleticism at his pro day, opened some eyes, and made him a draftable football player. You turn on the tape and you see some things that also catch your eye. He's a fluid athlete. I was impressed with him in the game versus West Virginia. Now, they were torched by Kevin White in this game, but I thought he was competitive at the line of scrimmage. He wasn't afraid. Kevin White was the most physically imposing receiver in this year's draft class, and I think that was one of the things that made him a top 10 pick. And Dexter McDonald said, I ain't afraid of no ghosts, man. What's good with you? He got in his face. He laid hands on Kevin White. Most guys are afraid to put hands on Kevin White because Kevin White is a big boy, okay? Kevin's throwing guys out of the way with just a dragon, let alone actually trying to get physical with Kevin. Let's get physical, physical. Trying to get physical with the most physical receiver in this year's draft class, but that's exactly what Dexter McDonald did. And I actually thought he looked good. He got his hands on him, made his release off the ball a little tough. I thought Kevin White eventually did get into his route, but Dexter McDonald did a great job of getting him in his hip pocket, was hip for hip with him, step for step, stride for stride. The only thing that Dexter McDonald didn't do, but he actually did knock the ball away on this particular play, but the only thing he didn't do is he didn't look for the football, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but I was impressed with Dexter McDonald and his ability to get in the receiver's face, challenge them, also play off 5 to 7 to 10 yards and be comfortable in that setting as well. So he's a guy that gives you a number of different techniques that he can use to try to confuse the quarterback and give them different looks, and also get up in the face of a receiver. You've got those kind of measurables. I talk about this all the time with the NFL moving to a longer cornerback. Now we're in the phase where you want bigger, longer, faster athletes at the cornerback position. You're looking for 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" corners with some length, with the ability to run and stay step for step with these receivers. You're looking for bigger athletes to challenge the Calvin Johnsons of the world, the Demaryius Thomases of the world, the Des Bryants, the Julio Joneses of the world, the AJ Greens. These are all guys that are north of 6'1", 6'2", that have elite capabilities, jumping, running, physical specimens that can get off the line of scrimmage and run and make plays down the field. Everyone's looking for their Richard Sherman. Everyone's looking for that longer athlete at the cornerback position that can run jump, and stay with these guys, be physical, press them at the line of scrimmage. Dexter McDonald fits that profile. He's got some things he's got to clean up, but he's competitive at the line of scrimmage. He gets his hands on the football. I talked about him getting his hand on that football against Kevin White in press coverage and running with him down the field and being able to deflect the football. That's something he specializes in. Dexter McDonald left Kansas with 4 career interceptions, 23 pass deflections, 13 of those coming in 2014, 10 coming the previous year. So 23 pass deflections in a 2-year span. That is tremendous by Dexter McDonald. It means he's getting his hands on footballs. Now, there are some drawbacks here. Let's jump into those quickly. Doesn't look for the ball enough, okay? He does not locate the football when it is in flight. He's the type of guy that, for the life of me, I can't understand why he can't track the football. Because a lot of times, he's in great position to make a play. Like, just find the football, guy. I mean, if he could find the football consistently, I'd venture to say that you could take him out in the 7th round with those kind of measurables, that size, take him out in the 7th round, plant him in the 4th round. If he could just find the football on a consistent basis, but he doesn't. He doesn't, which leads to pass interferences, which leads to catches that shouldn't happen. You're right there. Just look back. That's it. And he does not do it. For the life of me, I can't understand why not. He's flat-footed in off coverage. I like him much better when he is in the face of the receiver, because when he gets off the football, he tends to be a little lackadaisical, wants to squat on routes. Kevin White ran right by him on a particular play where he's literally 10 yards off the ball and he doesn't even get out of his stance. He's just standing there as if Kevin White was going to run an in-breaking route, or he was going to stop and run an out route. I'm like, did you not watch the tape? Have you not watched film on Kevin White? How often is it that he's catching an in-breaking route at 10 yards? How often is it that he's coming back to the football at 8 yards? He's either running a tunnel screen, a slant, or a deep post, or a 9 route. What are you waiting on? Why? If he runs more than 6 yards up the field, you need to start moving your damn feet. And he just stood there and Kevin White blew right by his ass. Triple coverage, ends up catching the football like 35 yards down the field, 40 yards down the field, or it was pass interference. One or the other. It was the responsibility of Dexter McDonald to not allow that to happen in any event, and he failed at that job. He can be very flat-footed in coverage, and he needs to tackle better. It's a situation where Kevin White's catching tunnel screens. You turn on the Oklahoma tape, he's missing tackles there. And I told you Samaje Perine had a 427-yard day. Anytime you're giving up that kind of yardage on the ground, there are big runs that happen. Anytime big runs happen, corners and safeties aren't doing their job on the outside. They're getting blocked, or they're taking bad angles, or they're missing tackles. You get the point. Dexter McDonald was a part of that horrific day by the defense against Oklahoma in that rushing attack. So he needs to tackle better, but at the end of the day, you can never fault a team for taking a height, weight, speed specimen in the 7th round and seeing if they can convert him into a football player, and that's what the Raiders have done. And I don't have a problem with it, because that height at that position with that kind of speed and those measurables, count me in every single day of the week in the 7th round. 242nd overall selection, defensive back out of Kansas, Dexter McDonald is a double to round out this Raiders draft. And so again, Reggie McKenzie has done it. Another solid draft by the Oakland Raiders. Not a lot of home runs, not a lot of flash here, but a lot of solid football players, much like last season. A lot of good football players that should make this roster. Again, this Raiders team is not talented enough to have guys not make this team. I look at this list. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players drafted here by the Raiders. And of these 10 players, I fully expect 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these players to make this roster. Minimum, okay? 6 of these guys I fully expect to be on the 53-man roster when it's all said and done. The other 4 have a legitimate shot. I won't count them out, but I don't know if they're going to make this roster or not. But 6 of these guys, Cooper, Edwards Jr., Walford, Feliciano, Ben Heaney, and Max Ballas, locks to make this roster if you ask me. Right now, barring injury, they're going to make this team. So Reggie McKenzie to me did it again. This is what he does. He is a guy that puts a lot of stock into the draft. Let's tally up the points for this Raiders draft. In the first round, you get a home run out of Amari Cooper. Then you have a triple twice in this draft, once for Clyde Walford and the other for Max Vallis. Then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 doubles, and you finish up with a single. Those 6 doubles nets you a few doubles bonuses, 4 to be exact. So at the end of the day, you tally up the home run, the 2 triples, the 10 doubles, and the 1 single at the end. You end up with 31 points for this Oakland Raiders draft. You divide by 10 picks, 3.1 triple for the Oakland Raiders, as the silver and black attack looks to be back on the attack once again. So the man with the one eye is back on the prowl. Let's see if he's able to make some noise in 2015. That's going to do it for the Oakland Raiders in their 2015 NFL Draft. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. Come back and join me as I continue to break down anything and everything in the National Football League. And one little sidebar before I get out of here. The NFL lost a great in Kenny Stabler, aka the Snake, one of 11 quarterbacks in NFL history to win multiple Super Bowl championships. Probably one of the most underrated quarterbacks in NFL history. Hasn't been elected to the Hall of Fame yet. I surmise that with his death now, he'll probably start to get a little bit more recognition, and it's a shame because he should have been inducted while he was still alive to be recognized for it. Pretty sure he'll get in now as a inductee down the road, but again, NFL loses a great player. Kenny, one of the most flamboyant players as well, Kenny the Snake Stabler, gone as an Oakland Raider, joining the rest of those guys in the heavens above. That'll do it for the Raiders in their 2015 NFL Draft. Who's next? There's plenty more where that came from. While you're here, subscribe to the channel. If you want more Louie T, be sure to follow me on Twitter at @InTheLabRoom, or you can like the Facebook page at In the Lab Room. That's In the Lab Room on Facebook and at In the Lab Room on Twitter. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so.